So, you chose the white pill. Or maybe you didn't and you just want to see what I have to say about the white pill. Either way, we are here now, and if you're here, you actually probably did choose the white pill. As of this recording, we have over 1,100 votes in the poll, and 71% of responders say they want to take the white pill. So, Russell Wilson stays, but the coaching staff and front office, by and large, leaves. And the team will try to rebuild without losing their veteran prime quarterback. It makes a lot of sense why about 800 people chose this option. It's definitely the most appealing option in terms of what we would like to see happen at the end of the rainbow. Especially if you're like me, who is a little bit of a Pete Carroll hater, and I know a lot of you guys are Pete Carroll haters right now because of the way this season has gone. But you still like Wilson, you still know that he's really good, and you know that sometimes it's hard to replace a franchise quarterback. Some of you guys don't know life without Wilson because you've only been a Seahawks fan for the last decade, and he's always been your quarterback. And it doesn't surprise me that nearly 800 people took the white pill. However, the white pill is probably the hardest pill to actually have work for you. It's easy to swallow because the idea of getting rid of your dinosaur head coach and your failing front office and bringing in new guys to try to accommodate your superstar quarterback that you really like, that makes a lot of sense. But I'll tell you right now, most of the time, that white pill is just going to make you puke. It's not going to get you where you want to go. This is probably the highest degree of difficulty to pull off for this franchise. And if you fail, and it's so easy to fail, you're setting yourself back a lot, and you're setting Russell Wilson back a lot. So everyone loses, and the loss is pretty severe. So I hope you guys know what it means when you say you want to take the white pill. You are taking a route that has maybe, I would say, a 10% chance of working and a 90% chance of ending in disaster. Let's run down a potential white pill path that I think could work. This is not the only path that can work, but it's a path that I would choose if I were in charge. I'm going to name some players, but they're not the only players who could at least give this team a chance to succeed. But just keep in mind that ultimately I'm just trying to present one possible scenario. So, the white pill. Basically, there are 4 steps to the white pill. And if you can complete all of them, if you can complete all 4 successfully, of course, successfully, that's important, you've got yourself a really good team for the next couple years with Wilson and with a new regime in charge. So you clean out most of the coaching staff, or all, and most of the front office, or all. There are a couple of pieces in the coaching staff and front office you might keep around, but most of them go. However, you then have to keep the roster that they built. A lot of the core pieces on this team, the guys who are still under contract, 1 or 2 of the guys who are actually playing really well, a lot of the pieces that the current regime put together need to stay for at least 1 more season. So you're saying that you don't think the coaching staff and front office was good enough. You don't think they were doing their job effectively, but you think that the roster they put together is good enough to win with, for the most part. Now, even if you keep that roster together, there are going to be holes, so you need to fill in those holes, and you need to fill them in with players who are ready to be great now. Not in 2023, not in 2024, not even really in the second half of 2022, but immediately from pretty much game 1 of the 2022 season. So no projects, no raw rookies, no guys with high upside but no production, pieces who are ready to go day 1. And then you contend for a deep playoff run at the very least in 2022 to keep Wilson satisfied. So that's the list of objectives here, but there are so many difficulties with making this work that it's going to take me a couple minutes just to get through this list. So the difficulties with this strategy are finding coaches willing to work with the team that was assembled by the previous regime, because a lot of coaches are going to want to come in here and build their own team, not take over someone else's team. You need to have those coaches be effective and be able to immediately produce good results, because the goal is to contend in 2022. And then you have all the holes you do need to still fill in the roster. You need to find new offensive tackles and a new center who can be good off the bat. You need to correctly assess which defensive linemen are bad and which ones were good but just misused by Pete Carroll. You need to get at least one more starting quality linebacker to accommodate a 3-4 defense, because I think that's what we're going to. You need to figure out which cornerbacks, besides Trey Brown, who is pretty well locked in, should stay with the team and filling the gaps in that secondary. You need to make the correct decision at free safety, make the correct decision at kicker, and then you have to survive the possibility of putting Wilson through yet another new offense after 1 year of Shane Waldron's offense, and then you have to compete in a very tough division. And by the way, before you even get into any of that, you need to actually sell Wilson on this potentially working, or he might just say, no, get me out of here, I want out. So that's a lot of stuff to sort through, and you can't really get any of it wrong. You are going to make a lot of moves this offseason if this is the path you decide to take. You can maybe get one or two things a little bit wrong, and you can fill in gaps midseason with a trade. You can kind of worm your way out of one or maybe two mistakes, but you have such a small margin for error. If a couple things go wrong with the way you build this team, and I mean even a little wrong, like, oh, this guy's going to be good next year, but he's not ready to be good this year, then throw it all in the garbage. 2022 is going to be bad, and then you're going to have to blow up the team, and it's going to be even harder. So, again, I understand why the white pill tastes good when you put it in your mouth. Good chance you end up puking it back up. All right, so let's go through some decisions that this team could make that would at least make me think we have a chance. And again, I want to stress this is not the only good path, but it is a path that I personally would do if I were in charge. There are probably other good paths, and this path may end up being a bad path for one reason or another. I'm making some assumptions based off limited information, as we all have to do. But here's my take on things. So first, let's say you keep John Schneider at GM. And even if you don't, it doesn't really change most of the stuff I'm about to say. But let's say Schneider stays. Let's say he separates himself from the Carroll mess. So first up is finding a head coach. And I already went over some of the difficulties here, but the coach, whoever he is, needs to be excited about working with Russell Wilson and willing to work with most of the roster left over from this season. So he needs to look at Russell Wilson and go, yeah, I'm really excited to work with that guy. And he also needs to look at some of the guys that the previous regime brought in and go, okay, I can work with this. I can work with guys like Tyler Lockett. I can work with guys like DK Metcalf, obviously. Yeah, I can work with some of the pieces on defense that are going to be here for at least a little while longer. Guys like a Kerry Hyder. You need him to look at most of the pieces you already have in place and be comfortable with doing that for at least one more year. Most head coaching candidates, especially good ones, are going to want roster control and the ability to clean house and implement their own stuff. So you need to find a guy who's willing to say, okay, I can wait a year on implementing my full roster vision. Because of this, most of the best head coaching candidates will not be options, as they will want full roster control and a clean slate, like I said. So when you choose this path, you are probably saying goodbye to a lot of the top coaching candidates. A lot of them are going to say, no, I'm not walking into that. I'm not going to be set up to fail because I have to take control of this roster, mostly in its current state. Most optimistic candidate for me, the guy who I think could be okay with all this, would be Lincoln Riley. If you want to find a guy who is going to get a tingle down his leg when thinking about working with Russell Wilson, and might be willing to say, I can work with the talent that the previous regime leaves me, then I think Lincoln Riley's the most likely candidate. He's got a 53-8 record over 5 seasons at Oklahoma. Great candidate for working with Wilson in the future because of all the success he had working with quarterbacks at Oklahoma. I mean, look at this track record. I listed it right here. 2017, Oklahoma averaged over 45 points a game. Baker Mayfield won the Heisman, throwing for over 4,600 yards and 43 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. 2018, they were even better, 48.5 points a game. Kyler Murray won the Heisman, almost 4,400 passing yards and like 1,000 rushing yards. 42 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. 2019, Jalen Hurts is second in the Heisman race. The team averages over 42 points a game, 3,800 passing yards, 32 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and Hurts had, I think, 100 rushing yards as well. 2020, 43 points per game with Rattler, who is a clear step down from his predecessors at OU, but still a good season, 3,000 yards in 11 games, I think. 28 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. In 2020, he hasn't gotten the same spark out of his QBs. He's actually gone between Rattler and Williams, but they're still averaging close to 42 points a game, and two QBs combined so far this season have about 2,200 yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So this guy's a little bit of a QB wizard, and I think he would look at Russell Wilson and go, okay, he's got the deep ball of what Kyler Murray was doing when he was at Oklahoma, combined with the general mobility and escapability of a Baker Mayfield, because obviously Wilson is not anywhere near what Murray was, but I think he would look at Wilson and go, yeah, I can work with that. So if Riley can be sold on the current offensive roster and be comfortable with allowing a coordinator to control the defense, that's another thing that I'm going to be asking my head coach to do in all likelihood, it can work. So other than Riley, most of the prize candidates, like I said, and there are a lot of guys, Nathaniel Hackett in Green Bay, Brian DeBole, Eric Bieniemy, Josh McDaniel, Kellen Moore, Joe Brady, they would probably decline any offer because they're going to have a lot of offers, and they're not going to want to go somewhere where they're not going to have full roster control until year 2 at best. Either they don't want to work with Wilson, they don't want to work with the offensive roster that we already have in place, or maybe they want some control over the defense and they don't want to hand everything over to a defensive coordinator. That would be my guess. So at that point, if you don't get Lincoln Riley, or Lincoln Riley decides he doesn't want to get involved in this either, you quickly descend into the realm of forgettable retreads. And I don't really want any of the following names to be my head coach, but they will probably all be on the table as options if you're trying to shove this white pill down. John Fox, Leslie Frazier, Raheem Morris, Dennis Allen, Marvin Lewis, Dan Quinn. That'd be amusing. There's also the opportunity to get people who are probably or possibly going to get fired this offseason. Matt Nagy, Brian Flores, Vic Fangio, Ron Rivera, Mike Zimmer. Some people are going to say Kyle Shanahan, and he would be great. Actually, he would be one of the retreads you could get that would actually get me excited. I'm not sure if Kyle Shanahan wants to work with Russell Wilson because Wilson's not really his kind of QB, but he would probably be willing to make it work if it meant another head coaching job, assuming that he doesn't have a better offer out there. And then you have your caretakers, and that's the worst case scenario. That's like a Jim Tom Sula type where, yeah, he'll take the job and he's happy about the job, but there's a reason why he's happy to take the job, because he's not going to get a job anywhere else, and he's just happy to point at the camera and go, hey, look, Ma, I'm a head coach in the NFL. So yeah, we don't want that. Wilson will probably look at a lot of names in this above paragraph right here and view them as a non-starter, especially the defensive-minded head coaches like a Dan Quinn or a Marvin Lewis or a Dennis Allen, Vic Fangio especially. These are not guys that Wilson is going to want to be his head coach. At that point, what's the difference between that and keeping Carroll, honestly? Not a big difference at all. So in my estimation, you either need to get Riley or you need to find one of these top names who would be willing to work within the confines of being good immediately. Okay, so once you handle that, you come to the defensive coordinator. And this one's really important because in my ideal offseason plan, this is something that I've talked about a little bit with Hawk's Nest in our streams together, where you have a head coach focus on the offense, and then you have a defensive coordinator basically have complete control over the defense, and the head coach gets to just kind of kick back and not worry too much about it. That's something he mentioned in his stream with me last week, and it sounds like a pretty good idea to me, and it's probably the best way to get good results out of this white pill scenario. So, finding the right defensive coordinator. Assuming defensive coordinator is given control over this defense, we need to find one comfortable with the core of current defensive roster. So he can't come in here and be like, okay, you're cut, 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 you're cut. I'm blowing it all up. I want my own guys. He needs to look at a decent chunk of this defensive roster and be like, I can paint the Sistine Chapel with these guys. So the guys who are going to be really hard to let go are Jamal Adams, because it costs way more money to get rid of him than it does to keep him. Carlos Dunlap, there's going to be like $900,000 in savings if you let him go. So it would be preferable to have a scenario where you feel like you can continue to use him. But for reasons I'm about to get into, it might just have to be something you take on the chin. Jordan Brooks on a rookie deal, not going anywhere. Darrell Taylor, rookie deal, not going anywhere. Plus, he looks really good. Trey Brown, rookie deal, not going anywhere. Alton Robinson, rookie deal, not going anywhere. So I need a defensive coordinator to look at this list and go, I can work with most or all of those guys and produce good results in 2022. And then that defensive coordinator gets to make decisions on a handful of players like Poona Ford, who could be cut to save about $5 million, but you could keep him if you feel like he fits in your defense. Kerry Hyder is cheap, but you do save $2 million if you cut him, so the defensive coordinator can make his decision there. Guys like DJ Reed and Quandre Diggs, the defensive coordinator gets to decide, do I want to keep them or do I want to let them go? There are other assorted rookies and expiring contracts for depth players. Guys who don't really play that big of a role in the defense and won't under any circumstance, unless, of course, disaster strikes, but guys that you still have to make decisions on. So my favorite candidate, and this is another guy that Hawk's Nest has mentioned in his streams that he does with me, but I mean, a lot of people have already run through this one because he's going to be a very appealing option who's probably about to hit the market because he's about to get fired, almost certainly, from Miami. Brian Flores. Not a lot of success as a head coach in Miami. He did have a good season last year, but it's turned into the season from hell so far in 2021, so he's probably going to get the axe. He served as a position coach or defensive assistant under Bill Belichick in New England from 2011 to 2018. It doesn't seem like the head coaching thing is good for him, but he clearly has a lot of defensive knowledge in his head, and he did manage to have some degree of a positive influence on the Dolphins defense in 2020 at least. They did have a pretty good team that year. So if he would take the step down to defensive coordinator and come over to Seattle, then we could probably say as long as you're willing to work with most of the already present talent, then you can have complete control over the defense in terms of play calling and scheming and things like that. He's not the only good option, but one thing that makes him in my opinion, the best option is that he's been running the 3-4 at least some of the time in Miami because they run a hybrid defense. He's a good fit for Jamal Adams with hybrid looks. Darrell Taylor is a great fit for an outside linebacker. The only problem is you probably have to lose Dunlap because Dunlap, he kind of got pushed out of Cincinnati because they changed their scheme to a 3-4. So if you're going to change this scheme to a 3-4, you probably got to let Dunlap go. And that's going to be a little bit of money you're wasting, but I think that's probably going to be the cost of doing business with somebody like a Brian Flores. And at the end of the day, I think this team needs to switch to a 3-4 for the sake of Jamal Adams. So if Dunlap's the price you pay for that, then so be it. There are some other guys that I kind of like. Patrick Graham from the Giants. I've had a couple people in stream like Mike C, my boy Mike C, mentioned him as a head coach, but he's not really having a good year for the Giants right now, so he might have to take a lateral move. Giants defense has not been very good this year, but Graham has produced good results. as recently as last year. They were ninth in the NFL in New York last year. Really good down the stretch, especially. He uses a hybrid D that is willing to blitz. Wade Phillips is maybe the best 3-4 coach in the history of the NFL. He's somebody who could come in here and probably get these guys playing at a really high level very quickly because that's what he's done his whole career. I know he's been out of the league for a while and he's old, but maybe he would come back for one last ride. And this last guy I'm going to get made fun of for, but that's okay because whatever. Dom Capers, another 3-4 genius. And he actually is still in the NFL right now. He's with the Lions. He's a consultant, I think. So he's not actually a coach, but maybe you could offer him a DC job and see what he has left. But those would be the guys that I would gravitate towards as defensive coordinator candidates. There are definitely other guys like Vic Fangio who could be available this offseason, but I don't want guys who run a 4-3. I do want to switch to that 3-4 to get the most out of Jamal Adams. And that's it for defensive coordinator. Let's move on to part 3, reloading the offensive line. This might be the hardest part, by the way. So all the white pillars out there, I'm not one of them, but I can imagine myself as one for long enough to make this video. Be aware that this is probably the hardest part. Yes, even harder than finding a head coach willing to work within these confines. I am not looking forward to having to figure this one out, but I'm going to present the scenario to the best of my abilities and try to come up with one that I think can actually work. And if you think you have a better one, let me know for sure, but I'm going to do the best I can to break this down and explain it. So, you need to replace both tackles. Dwayne Brown's done. He's toast. Get him out of here. Even if he was playing well, he's too old. Brandon Shell is a free agent, and he's pretty good, but he's also injury prone, and we need to do better. This half measure crap is not cutting it with Wilson. If we try to go for half measures again, I expect Wilson to demand a trade, and we're trying to avoid that. So you got to do better than Brandon Shell and possibly center. So I'm willing to acknowledge that Kyle Fuller has shown improvement this year, but he also just played one of the worst games I've ever seen in my life. So I can't really talk up anything good about him without sounding stupid. And here's the bigger problem. The offensive line needs to be good immediately. You cannot have the offensive line spend all year getting their crap straight because you've introduced a whole bunch of young or new or inexperienced pieces, and by the time they're good, it's too late. Wilson's already dead. Can't have it. It needs to be good immediately. Stone Forsythe and Jake Curhan, cross them off. Maybe they can be depth. Maybe they can be part of the future, but you cannot have those guys be your starters going into the season. There's way too much at risk to do that. That's not even a half measure. Wilson would probably sit out before he plays behind Stone Forsythe and Jake Curhan in their second years. Kyle Fuller, I already mentioned this. He could be the center if his improvement continues, but it's unlikely, and especially after that Saints game, it's very unlikely. So I'm not going to bank on that. I think we need a new center as well. So that's 3 new starters on the offensive line. For those of you keeping track at home, it's really hard to get an offensive line playing really well immediately like that. It doesn't happen that often. Usually they need time. They need weeks, months, maybe even a year playing together. So here are the guys that I think you could target in free agency at these positions, and you have to hit this hard. It's going to suck. It's going to be expensive. You're not going to like it, but you have to do it. That's the cost of keeping Wilson. Tell your players to start eating mac and cheese every day for 6 months. Tighten your belt so you don't feel the hunger pangs. Whatever. You got to save money so you can bring these guys in. You got to work some cap magic to make this work. Teron Armstead is going to be 31 next year of the Saints. Very good left tackle. Very, very talented guy. He would be a certified blue chipper, probably plug and play, probably going to demand a $100 million contract, but you got to do it. That's the cost of keeping Wilson, I think. My backup option would be Cam Robinson. He's in Jacksonville, but he's not great. He's pretty good, and I think he could be better in a better offense that isn't, Jacksonville. But he's not a blue chipper like Armstead, and he's not nearly the Russell Wilson safety net that he's looking for. But Cam Robinson would be a decent consolation prize. I think you can make it work with that. Right tackle, the two names that stand out to me on the free agency list this offseason are Trenton Brown from, I think he's from New England. He's good. He's only going to be 29 next year. I think he would be an improvement over a guy like a Brandon Shell, probably more durable. My consolation prize here would be Morgan Moses, who you had a chance at this offseason, never bit, but he's still good. He is getting older, so it's a concern, but at this point, that might be a chance that you have to take. It's reasonable to think that Morgan Moses still has some good years left in him. And center, the free agents that caught my eye, and by the way, there are one or two more guys other than just what's listed here that would be okay. Ryan Jensen, the Tampa Bay center, is a free agent this offseason. They might lose him, especially if Brady retires and they decide to kind of take a year to reload. So Ryan Jensen's at the top of the list for me. He's very good, generally been fairly durable. Austin Corbett would be my second. He's actually from the Rams, 26 years old, having a good year. Probably going to get a pretty fat deal, I think. Probably going to get a decent free agency offer, but again, this is the cost of keeping Wilson in my view. Woo! We went a while there. Okay, so here's some guys in the draft that I like. I want to be very clear. These are preliminary estimations. I haven't done a ton of scouting yet. I've done a little bit, and I'm just giving you guys some data from my preliminary findings. So if you want to get a left tackle from the draft, the two guys who I like are Sean Ryan from UCLA and Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa. I think they would be decent fits. I think they're going to be good. The question is, are they going to be good immediately? And the answer to that question is usually no, but it's not always no, I guess. Right tackle, the two guys who I like are Nicholas Petit-Frere from OSU and Daniel Falele, my favorite, from Minnesota. But I expect him to rocket up the draft boards, and you might not have a chance at him, unfortunately. But if he's there, he's probably my favorite. And it's a little more believable that a right tackle could be good immediately than a left tackle. And it's also a little more forgiving because it's not the blind side. So I think you could probably attack right tackle through the draft and get away with it. And finally, the two centers who stand out to me at this point in my scouting process are Tyler Linderbaum from Iowa and Alec Lindstrom from Boston College. Again, I want to be very clear. This is very early in my process, but those are the guys who caught my attention as I was trying to scout out options here. So those, to me, are the viable options. I'm going to say this. I think that the best path forward is Teron Armstead, Austin Corbett, and Daniel Falele. And I know that is a ton of money you're spending in free agency on the offensive line. But, again, that's what you got to do sometimes. It sucks. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be expensive. You're going to have to lose some stuff. Say goodbye to Bobby Wagner. Say goodbye to probably one or two other players you like. But cost of doing business. I mean, Jason Myers might be gone anyway, but that is what it will take to make Wilson happy right now, because we've had too many years in a row of trying to half-ass this. We got a whole ass it this time. Okay. Part 4 of the offseason plan is solve the defensive line. And this one's interesting because if we do what I want us to do, we will be switching to a 3-4 defense for at least some of the time. Probably most of the time, and possibly pretty much all the time. So the defensive line doesn't matter quite as much because you need fewer players, but you still need good players. So here's what I would do with the information I have at my disposal right now. There are some players on the defensive line for the Seahawks right now who are just bad, but others are good and are products of the bad environment and can be salvaged. And you have to get it right. You have to know which ones are bad and which ones can be good in the right situation. And then you have to act on that knowledge, and you have to get it pretty much all right. You can't afford to get anything wrong because you're hanging on the edge of a knife as it is. So here's what I would do. I would keep Kerry Hyder Jr., I would keep Poona Ford, and I would keep Brian Monet. I think those guys are good. I would drop Rasheem Green. I don't believe in him anymore. I would drop Carlos Dunlap, not a good fit. And LJ Collier I would also drop because he's just bad, period. And I'm tired of it. I could go either way on Robert Kimdichie because he's going to be super cheap and whatever. And I could go either way on Al Woods because he's been really good this year, but he is old. And I understand that he could just fall off a cliff at any time. And I don't want to be the one paying him when he does. So at that point, you're not going to have a whole lot of money to round out the rest of your defensive line, but you are going to have to pick up some new players. So go to the bargain bin, go to the late rounds of the draft, go to UDFA, find linemen to round out the depth. You got to make some right picks here. You got to get it right. Alton Robinson was a guy you drafted in 2019 in the, what was it, fourth or fifth round, and pretty immediately he was making positive contributions for you. You need to find an Alton Robinson or two. Not a one-to-one equivalent, but you understand what I mean. You're going to need to get some of those long shots correct, and they're going to have to be correct year one. Going to more 3-4 reduces the need for DL depth, though, so you probably only need to find a couple other guys who are rotation worthy, and then you can find some other guys who are just warm bodies, and you have a chance, because I do believe that Puna Ford is good. I think Kerry Hyder Jr. is good. I think Monet could be good. I'm not... it's hard to know. He was really good in that first game, then he got hurt, and he hasn't been the same, so kind of TBD there, but you need a couple other guys who can at least play competently. Okay, part 5. Solve the linebacker corp. And because you're switching to a 3-4, you're now going to have more linebackers out there on the field. So, again, you need to pick through the players you currently have, choose the ones you like, get rid of the ones you don't like, and build off whatever you have left. So, the good news is I don't think we're in a terrible position here. I think we have a chance to do some things pretty well. So, the outside linebacker spot is in good shape. Darrell Taylor and Alton Robinson can maybe be your starting outside linebackers in the 3-4. And Alton Robinson's probably going to be pretty pure pass rusher. Admittedly, I don't know if he can do it, but I'm willing to give him a chance because I think Alton Robinson's good. Darrell Taylor can definitely do that, I think. I'm pretty confident in that. Darrell Taylor can be a 3-4 OLB, no problem. Benson Mayowa can rotate in part of the pass rush rotation. I think that's pretty reasonable. He's under a contract where it would be kind of weird to get rid of him, so I think that Mayo can stay around for that, and I think you've got the foundation of something pretty good there. Inside linebacker, Jordan Brooks can probably play one of those inside linebacker roles, but assuming Bobby Wagner gets cut, and I'm very confident he will get cut in this scenario because the main thing keeping him here in 2022 would be Carroll's sentimentality. And if Carroll's not here, there's nobody to be sentimental about it. Like, maybe Wagner takes a monster pay cut and you can keep him that way. But honestly, I want to move on. I want to get somebody young and cheap and faster and more athletic. Wagner, his best days are long behind him. I want to turn the page on Bobby Wagner. So we need another starter. Anthony Walker Jr., I believe he's in Cleveland this year, is an appealing option if you can afford it. I think he's going to demand some money, but not a ton. I also kind of like David Mayo. He's a little cheaper. He has good coverage metrics over his recent playing time. Those are the two veterans that I would kind of like if you decide to attack this issue with veterans. In the draft, mid to late round options include Grant Morgan from Arkansas, Kalon Tolson from Illinois, and Micah McFadden from Indiana. So it's a little murky here because you don't know which guys are exactly going to be good in a 3-4 and which guys are only built for a 4-3. It is a little different, and there's no guarantee that everybody's going to be able to make the transition. I would be fine with pretty much any of these rookies, and then you just plug them in and hope that the talent around them allows them to play effectively as rookies. These are like 3rd, 4th, 5th round guys, by the way, probably, so you're taking a gamble, but there are going to be gambles baked into this whole white pill scenario. Whoever it is must be able to start day one, as Barton and Burkervin may be adequate depth but should not start. You probably need to add one more rotation-worthy outside linebacker as well, but should be easy enough to locate in the later rounds of the draft. So that's basically the linebacker rundown. It's doable if the guys that you already have in place are capable of playing in that 3-4 defense. But you do need to find one more starting inside linebacker, and that's not a given. Like I said, I would take any of these rookies, plug them in, whichever one you think fits your scheme the best, and hope that they're able to produce as rookies. Linebackers often play effectively as rookies. It happens pretty frequently. I think it's reasonable. Okay, now we're moving on to part 6. We're going to solve the cornerback room because we have some questions here, and sorry for my green screen effect flickering out every now and then. solve the cornerback room. So we know a little bit of our future at cornerback, but we don't know a lot. So Trey Brown is locked in at one starter, and that's pretty cool because Trey Brown has a lot of flexibility in his game. He can play nickel, he can play outside, he can play zone, he can play man. So whatever you want to do at cornerback next year, Trey Brown can be part of it. I could see him slotting over to nickel under a different defensive coordinator, maybe one who finds other outside corners that he likes, or maybe he just has a different plan in mind for the way he wants his cornerbacks to play. But whatever it is, Trey Brown should be able to be a part of it. Now, he needs to be a good part of it, but so far so good with that experiment, really. DJ Reed is good and young, but he does need a new contract, and it could be difficult to play with two cornerbacks who are 5'10 or below at the same time. DJ Reed and Trey Brown, both very short. Maybe your defensive coordinator, hopefully Brian Flores, looks at that and goes, ugh. And then you've got to do something else. Blair is probably out of the picture due to injuries. Ugo Amadi is probably still going to be on the team because he's in the last year of his rookie deal, but he's not really showing that much. He could be part of the future. He could not. But if you're going to play with a secondary of Brown, Reed, and Amadi, you have a real size problem. And I have a feeling that whoever your DC is probably going to have a little bit of an objection to that. So here's some guys that I like who you could go get in free agency as veterans. These would mostly be one-year stopgaps, and you would probably need to work hard to get the money for them, but it is possible. Anything is possible in the NFL salary cap structure. Xavier Rhodes, 32 years old, but still playing fairly effectively. Steven Nelson, 29, in Philly. And Stephon Gilmore, you could decide to go get him now instead of getting him during the season if Carolina decides to let his contract expire, which as of right now, I guess they might, which is kind of dirty given that Gilmore wanted a new contract, but it seems like that's what they're going with right now, and it's certainly they're right. But anyway, if Gilmore hits the free agency market because Carolina decides we're not going to invest all this money into a corner right now, then maybe you could go get him. You need the money to work, but you could. Now, there are some solutions in the draft. I like Kyler Gordon from Washington, Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati, and Sam Webb from MW State. I think it's Mountain West State or something like that. I can't even remember, guys. I've done so much research lately. Looked at so many college names. So none of these solutions would be great because rookies are typically not going to be good from day one. Even Sherman took several games before he started getting on the field routinely. And he didn't start starting until, what was it, week 6, week 5, something like that. So the best solution is probably to lean on Brian Flores' defense to generate pressure and make life easier for a mediocre cornerback room because it's probably just going to be mediocre. For my part, I would like to keep DJ Reed because I do think he's playing well now that he's on the right side of the defense. And I would actually like to bring in a veteran like a Xavier Rhodes, hope that he's cheap because he's old, and bring in a rookie in the later rounds. These three guys, reach into a hat, grab one name, I'm fine with it. Or, whoever Brian Flores likes the best. Whoever he thinks he can work with the best, go with that. So that's how I would take care of the cornerback room. Give me a proven veteran, give me a rookie, and then keep Brown and Reed and hope something shakes out from all that. You can keep Amadi around too, by the way. It's not that big of a deal, but you can keep him around because why not? That's it for the cornerbacks. Let's go to free safety with Quandre Diggs. So, Quandre Diggs, Part 7. Diggs is likely to command $10 million per year given recent safety contracts, not just Jamal, by the way, and his solid play over the last year and a half. He's playing pretty well for this defense right now. Not amazing, but he is playing fine, and he'll get decent money this offseason. I'm pretty confident in that. So if you want to keep him, you're going to have to open up the checkbook. And in my scenario, you already opened up the checkbook for offensive lineman for Wilson, and you may be doing it for Metcalf as well, depending on what he wants this offseason. So, we can afford an extension, and I want to stress that. You can always afford to move around in the cap, but the question is, what do you have to deal with down the road in order to do it, and is it worth it? There are significant questions surrounding the idea of spending so much money at safety with a guy like Lincoln Riley at head coach. Lincoln Riley is already probably looking at Jamal Adams and his contract and going, if you tell him to deal with the Quandre Diggs contract as well, he might really start to go, no more, no more, no mas. I'm an offensive guy. Let me spend my money on offense. So I don't think we're going to keep Diggs. I don't think that works very well in this plan. And I would say you need to find a solution elsewhere. So here are some options for free safety. Perhaps former player under Flores in New England, Devin McCourty, who's 35 next year, but still probably has something left. You could maybe convince him to take a cheap one-year contract to hold down the position for 1 year. There are a lot of risks there, and he might not be willing to do it, but it's an option. There's also Curtis Riley. He's cheaper. He's younger. He's only 30. Last time he got on the field, a significant percentage of the time, he had 2 decent seasons for the Raiders and Giants in 2018 and 2019. Hasn't played a whole lot since, but maybe you could bring him in, and playing alongside Jamal Adams could allow him to be the player that he was for those 2 pretty good years. As for the draft, I'm only going to spend a second here. I like Jaquan Brisker from Penn State and Isaiah Poamoa from USC. They're both good free safety prospects. My problem is we need somebody who's going to know what he's doing right off the bat. We can't have a free safety who's Tedrick Thompsoning it out there every time because he needs experience. No, we don't have time for experience. You want time by the magazine. We need somebody who can be good from pretty much day one, because the last thing I need is this defense getting beat deep all the time because the free safety can't cover deep. And that's about it for that. I would personally go get a veteran like Devin McCourty or Curtis Riley, but there are a couple other passable options as well, including keeping Diggs. It's not impossible. Then we get to part 8. This is the final part that requires actual work on the part of the team, nailing the little things. We covered the hard stuff, but there's still some of the easy stuff. But just because it's easy doesn't mean it's a given. So we have potential gaps to fill at running back, tight end, kicker. So let's go over that real quick. Running backs are easy to find, but must find one who is capable of playing well immediately for cheap if Carson can't go reliably. Because if Carson can't go and Penny's gone, you still have Alex Collins maybe, but he's going to be an expiring contract as well. DJ Dallas, maybe he's something, I don't know. And I think Travis Homer, he is what he is, and what he is not bad, but it's not really good. If you're going to get a veteran running back to fill the gap, just to make sure you have somebody you can rely on, my favorite guys would be Philip Lindsay, 28, Marlon Mack, only 26, James Conner, 27, and Wayne Gallman, 27 years old. Those are my favorite cheap veteran options. There are other guys who would be okay as well, but bottom line, you need somebody who you can rely on, because Carson cannot be relied on right now, and nobody else on this team with any reliability is under contract in 2022. If you decide to get a rookie, guys that I like so far are Chris Rodriguez Jr. from Kentucky, Britton Brown from UCLA, and Zamir White from Georgia. Just preliminary scouting for those 3 guys, but I kind of like what I see from them so far. I think they would be decent fits for this offense. I would lean towards those guys right now. Okay, then we have the tight end problem. Gerald Everett and Will Dissly are both free agents. Even if you keep Dissly, and even if Parkinson improves, you probably need one more capable of tight end, because teams generally need 3, because sometimes you have 3 tight end sets, and even when you don't, injuries happen. So the question is, what do you need out of your tight end? Do you just want blockers and big red zone bodies, or do you actually want an athlete who can have big games and have a big season? If you desire a blocking tight end due to difficulty using them in passing game, because there's a lot of evidence that Wilson and tight ends just don't go well, or maybe there's just something in the water in Seattle. I don't know. But I like Blake Bell, great blocker over in Kansas City. I think he spent some time in Dallas. He's 31 next year. Darrell Daniels, also a good blocker, 27, plenty young. You could go get one of those 2 guys and just say, okay, between Dissly and Bell, or Dissly and Daniels, we're going to have the best blocking tight ends in the league. But if you do want to use tight ends more in the passing game, which Lincoln Riley has done at OU, I think Mark Andrews had 1,000 yards that first year Lincoln Riley was at OU, you could retain Everett because he's not bad, or you could bring in a guy like a Mo Alley Cox, who is 29 and reasonably productive if desired. It really just depends on what Lincoln Riley wants at that point. It's not going to be hard to find a capable tight end, especially because you've got good receivers in this offense, but you still need to find the right guy. Daniel Barker from Illinois and Kamor Gamble from Florida are my favorite late round tight end options. They're both good blockers, but if they come in as rookies, they're probably not going to be better than Colby will be in his third year. So you can't depend on those guys for production or play. So that's it for tight ends, I believe. Let's move on to kicker. Myers is in the final year of his contract next year, and he's having a bad year so far. So moving on to someone new is very possible in 2022. Now, you could keep Myers because kickers, like, kicking is random in the NFL, and who the hell knows who's going to be good or bad from year to year. But if you do decide to move on, some veterans I like are Nick Folk, Zane Gonzalez, and Joey Sly. Nick Folk is very old, so there's a little bit of a risk there, but he's a kicker, so whatever. And he's having a really good year. Zane Gonzalez and Joey Sly both have big legs and have had good seasons in the past. The top kicking rookies this year look like Parker White from SC, Andre Schmidt from Syracuse, and Jonathan Doer from Notre Dame. But the only guy who's playing really well so far this season is Parker White, so he would probably be my guy if you're going to go to the draft for this. There are probably going to be some late risers at the kicking position as well. Little too early to make any strong assumptions there, but those would be my guys as of right now. And that's it. That gets you to part 9, the final part of this video, your 2022 Seattle Seahawks. And I know this was a really long video. I know you guys sat there for a long time getting through all this. I appreciate all it. But let's take a look at what we have. So, the 2022 Seattle Seahawks, if we follow my offseason plan in terms of the exact desires, would be QB, Russell Wilson. Running backs, Chris Carson. I forgot to put Alex Collins here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. My bad. Alex Collins, Britton Brown, and DJ Dallas. Wide receivers, Metcalf, Lockett, Eskridge, and Freddie Swain. Of course, you're going to have guys like Penny Hart behind him, but I'm trying to focus on the things that really matter here. Tight ends, Will Dissly, Colby Parkinson, and Kamor Gamble. I think he can be a late-round pick for you. Offensive line, Taron Armstead, Damian Lewis, Austin Corbett, Gabe Jackson, and Daniel Falele. Stone Forsythe and Jake Curhan can be the backups at tackle. That's fine, but I need guys who I have more faith in 2022. And Armstead and Corbett are those guys. And Falele, he'll be a rookie, but you can mask that a little bit because the other guys are going to be pretty well entrenched and be good veterans. Defensive line, I would go with Kerry Hyder Jr., Poona Ford, and Brian Monet as the three guys up front starting. And then at outside linebacker, I would go Darrell Taylor, Alton Robinson, Benson Mayowa. Inside linebackers are Jordan Brooks, Grant Morgan, he was one of the rookies, and Cody Barton is depth. Cornerbacks, DJ Reed, Xavier Rhodes, Trey Brown, Sam Webb, and Ugo Amadi. So we've got a veteran, we've got a rookie, we've got a couple of holdovers. I think you give yourself some options here to be good. Strong safety is Jamal Adams. Free safety is Curtis Riley. He's probably my favorite stopgap if Diggs leaves, which I think he will. Kicker, Parker White, one of the rookies, and punter, Michael Dixon. Once you pad out the defensive depth on this team, it's a team that can realistically compete in 2022 within a difficult division if Wilson can pick up the offense fast and the offensive line can get on the same page early in the season. But it's an absurdly tall task to do all of this and have it work as fast as you need it to. So I drew out a path, and you can walk this path, but it is such a narrow one. So that's my white pill. Keep Wilson. Build a team fast that can compete for a title immediately and kick the can down the road another year or two. If it doesn't work, it's horrible. It's awful. Wilson's wasting his time. We're wasting our time as a franchise. It's going to be harder to blow it up because you had to bring in some expensive veterans and you're getting your team flow kind of out of sync almost because of these moves you're trying to make to shore things up in the short term. So that's why I say to the white pillars, y'all suckers are crazy. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. And as a little bit of a Pete Carroll hater, if we could get rid of Pete Carroll, bring in somebody else, and have that somebody else win with his roster plus a few additions, it would kind of prove some of the things that I've said about Carroll Wright in recent years, right? I've said that he's not a good coach. If somebody else comes in and wins with his team when he wasn't winning with them, yeah, yeah, that says something, right? All right, this is one of the longest videos I've ever made. Almost should have made it a stream, I guess, but I'm done. See you guys later. Peace out. Go Hawks. Red pill video is going to be next, and it's probably not going to be this long, but it will be long. So see you guys then. Go Hawks.